Hi everyone, it's me, Arielle, and it's Wednesday Warriors. This week we're going to be talking about eating disorders and athletics. So I'll be talking about several different kinds of sports, but basically sports in general and how that can influence an eating disorder negatively. This is just very much so a blanket statement, generally speaking, when someone has an eating disorder and is also involved in sports, how it can affect them. It's not to say that everyone who participates in a sport is at risk for an eating disorder. Some of the time there are certain traits or qualities involved, such as perfectionism, competitiveness, and comparison. And I think those three things really play a role in many people's eating disorders and recovery from an eating disorder, even when they don't participate in sports. So certainly when athletics come into play, there's always a little bit more room for those things. In talking about eating disorders, certain sports do come to mind, such as certain forms of dance and running sports and gymnastics. Again, that's a very general statement. There are many instances of eating disorders in other sports as well. I know several people who have participated in group sports, such as soccer, for example, that have experienced negative impacts on their eating disorder. It's not to say that the sports are what's causing their eating disorder. Again, it's just certain things to be on the lookout for and certain things that may not necessarily predispose a person to develop an eating disorder, but certain aspects of competition and comparison to other athletes or peers. There are many studies showing that those who participate in sports are at higher risk for development of an eating disorder. One of the things that may play a part in this is the weight checking. A lot of sports monitor an athlete's weight, and even if specific numbers aren't charted or monitored, sometimes body size, muscle mass, comparisons to other people on a team, it really can become a negative mental obstacle. A lot of athletes are competitive in nature to begin with, which is part of the reason they get involved in sports in the first place. And competition isn't a bad thing, but it can be taken to an obsessive level, to an unhealthy level, when you start coupling it with eating disorder behaviors or a poor body image. There can also be a lot of pressure from coaches, and this happens certainly for adults who are on sports teams, but it can also happen for students. And unfortunately, students are at such a detrimental point in their development of anything. Forget eating disorders, just life. It can be such a vulnerable time period because they're already somewhat on their guard. They, are influenced by their peers. They're certainly influenced by their coaches. They don't want to be a disappointment. They really want to please parents and friends and coaches, and they really want to do their best. Sometimes, depending on the sport, certain coaches can encourage a student, a team member, to lose weight. And depending upon if a coach has experience with eating disorders, sometimes a coach can be very critical, can be very harsh. And this kind of influence, while it doesn't cause an eating disorder, it certainly doesn't help, and it can, promote a negative body image instead of a positive one. I've heard numerous stories about coaches that have really negatively impacted their athletes that they're coaching, and it's really sad because a lot of the time it isn't that a coach is unkind or that a coach is trying to be detrimental to a student. It's just that the coach is uneducated in eating disorders and uneducated in what does promote a positive self-image, a positive body image, and positive competition, because competition can be positive. I think, too, that coaches really need to educate themselves about the dangers of eating disorders, the signs to look for in anyone, but especially in their athletes, to understand if someone already maybe has an eating disorder, already is struggling and suffering, so they can put the person's health first and understand that maybe this person isn't going to be up to par because they already have an issue, Or maybe they should be giving this person a second look and taking them aside and trying to get them the help they need. Try to get them to be aware of their problem if they're not already aware of it, but also just letting them know that their health is the most important thing, not the competition, not the sport, even if that is a sincere passion of the athletes. I think another huge problem is that athletes, especially student athletes, but any athletes, any gymnasts, dancers, any kind of individual participating in some kind of sport, is going to be some of the time afraid to come forward and say, hey, I have an eating disorder and I need help, because they don't want it to ruin their career. They don't want it to reflect badly upon them. They don't want to seem like they can't hack it. And it's sad, because many people with eating disorders know just how hard it is to take that first step and to let someone that they trust know that they are struggling and that they do have a problem. So to be so scared and to come forward and ask for help and be met with a negative reaction is extremely difficult, and it can actually propel the eating disorder and have a negative impact on the eating disorder and on the recovery from an eating disorder itself. Eating disorders take away health. They don't make a person healthier. And even if you're an athlete and you're a great athlete and you're really good at what you do, if you have an eating disorder, it's impacting your health and it's impacting your athletic ability. And you really owe it to yourself to get help. You deserve it. You're worthy of help. You're important. If you tell someone about your eating disorder and they don't understand and they don't offer resources or compassion or help, find someone who will, because there is someone out there who cares. There is someone out there who can help you, and don't worry about getting shot down when you take that first step to put yourself out there and be honest and say, I can't do this anymore because I'm sick. One of the great things about being sick is that you can get well. There's sick and there's well. And if you're sick, you don't have to be sick for life. When it comes down to it, I have the same advice for athletes with eating disorders as I have for anyone with an eating disorder. Full recovery is possible. You can get help, you can get better, and you deserve it. I've talked with people who don't get eating disorders, who don't understand eating disorders, and who deal with athletes. But for every one of those people, I've met someone who does understand how serious an eating disorder is, who does understand that there are many athletes that are struggling with some form of disordered eating, and that there are many athletes who are afraid to talk about it, to come forward, to let on that it's actually a problem. And there are supportive individuals out there. There are supportive athletes and coaches and people who want to understand if you'll help them. Don't give in to fear. If fear is all that's stopping you from talking about your eating disorder, from understanding how you can find a balance in your life of athletics and recovery, talk to someone. Don't be afraid. Don't let the fear stop you. Don't give more power to fear than you're giving to yourself. Don't give more power to your eating disorder than you're giving to yourself. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Take care. Stay well.